So this is a learning video, no more no less. I'm not an attorney, so just take everything as a grain of salt. Now, this has to do with jury notification. Alright? And she's really hip on this jury notification thing, which I researched, and she's right on cue, so I have no problem with showing this video of my own research. Alright, of course we're going to have these little pop-ups because I still have not figured out how to open and close it.
Maybe someone committed a higher level offense by the letter of the law, but jurors actually convict them of a lesser charge because they think, yes, you shouldn't have committed this offense, but there are mitigating circumstances, so we feel that higher level punishment is too much. And I'm going to talk about some of those cases as we start to transition to a little bit more modern examples of hero jurors. This is still historic, but it's a lot more recent. And so what we're gonna take a minute here. I've got my prop here with me, and I'm just going to ask really quickly. If you're on Zoom, put it in the chat. If you're on Facebook, maybe in the comments here, let me know how many of you have ever indulged in a cocktail or hard liquor or wine or beer. Anyone? Pretty sure the answer is no one, of course, because we had prohibition in the United States. Perhaps our compatriot across the ocean has, but in the United States, as we all know, there was that prohibition era, and that stuck, and none of us has had a drop of liquor to this day, right? Okay, that's not quite how it worked out, is it? Well, if you have ever had the opportunity to imbibe in this enjoyable way, you can thank a juror for that in the United States. And why is that? Well, I believe it was less than an hour after federal prohibition took effect that the very first liquor violation in the United States was recorded. And those violations would continue to be extensive throughout a decade that came to be known as the Roaring Twenties, and not for no reason. The prohibition rules did basically nothing to stamp out the consumption of alcohol. People made excuses that they were using things for medicinal purposes. People took their activities and production underground. And, in some cases, people actually didn't hide it very much. Well, I have looked through a number of newspapers looking for Prohibition-era articles to learn how did jurors deal with these, and I was so encouraged by what I found. And I'll just share one case, maybe more than one. We'll see how it goes. But I love this case in particular because I felt the jurors were so conscientious. And in this particular case, the article I found wasn't about the trial. Rather, it was about what happened the next day when the judge called these jurors back to court, stood them up in front of him, and gave them quite the tongue lashing for what he thought they had done wrong. Let's see if you agree or disagree. These jurors, I thought, were very conscientious. Okay, they had been called in to judge a liquor violation. They listened to the trial very carefully, the testimony, the evidence, everything was done, the closing arguments. They're now sent off to the jury room to deliberate. And what is sent with them? Why, the evidence. And when the evidence was sent with them, they did what you and I are probably doing. Well, I'm looking at this. How do I know that's alcohol? This is a clear substance, right? Could be water. You know what? I can't convict him just on that. I'm going to have to do a little experiment. And they were very conscientious. They did that indeed. Boy. Yep. That evidence test was good. But it's not enough. Let's let all the other jurors try this out. So one by one, they went around the room doing their very conscientious experiment on this sample, and at one point discovered to their surprise there was no evidence left. What could they do? If there's no evidence, they certainly had to find him not guilty, and in fact, they acquitted this gentleman of any sort of alcohol violation. And for that, if you can believe it, this judge was scolding them. I mean, they did their level best to try and follow all of the instructions and do what they were supposed to do, and here they were getting chewed out for it. All of them but one, that is. I'm sure this is a total coincidence, but there was one woman juror who wasn't able to make it to court that day. She was homesick. Totally unrelated, I am sure. Well, that's not the only case from the Prohibition era that I have found. We actually have an episode in which Robert Anthony Peters, our vice president, and I go through a number of cases on the feature podcast, Behind Closed Doors. There's a wonderful case in which the jury acquits a man of a liquor violation, and in celebration, he pulls a bottle out of a paper bag and takes a swig right there in court and is promptly rearrested. There are cases where jurors are taken out for a beer after they acquit someone of a liquor violation, and they're taken out by the judge to go get a beer. It's just amazing. There were a large number of jurors who simply would not convict their neighbors during the Prohibition era. And so there we have an example of another United States constitutional amendment that's brought to us in part thanks to jury nullification, and that's the 21st Amendment, repealing prohibition. Now, to transition to a little more modern times, what kind of analogs does anyone see there? And anything in particular come to mind? Well,
I'm going to pause that for a second. So back then, love thy neighbor, right? Nowadays, hate thy neighbor. Make phone calls against your neighbor. Get your neighbor punished. Back then, neighbors stuck together. Just saying.
For me, this has a really strong resemblance to the modern Prohibition era in which cannabis is prohibited. And we actually have seen a number of cases in which jurors refuse to convict their neighbors for victimless cannabis crimes. In San Diego, we saw a series of trials in which people who were using it for medicinal purposes, people who had very serious cancer or other, similar level illnesses, who were medicating for medical purposes, and yet I believe her name is Bonnie Dumanis, the prosecutor at the time in the area, was one by one taking them to court. And we got to give a big shout out to Americans for Safe Access San Diego chapter for giving me the details on this, because in a period that spanned about 6 months, when jury nullification information was being handed out to people standing in line going into the courthouse for jury duty, over that 6 months, they found that at the beginning, it was like a week to get someone convicted, a day to pick the jury, 4 days for the trial. Before you left on Friday, they were convicted. But then it got harder as more people learned about jury nullification. It was taking more than a day to be able to pick a jury because they were trying to weed out more and more fully informed jurors. And then the trial they'd have to come back on Monday to wrap it up. And then they started not getting convictions. And by the very end, they basically had the prosecutor give...
Now catch that one part. Fully informed jurors. Right? We have partial formed jurors. Not fully informed juries.
Up trying to convict people of medical marijuana users of these cannabis crimes because it was becoming too humiliating for her to be losing all the time. And at the same time, sadly, now disgraced, but at the time, the person who was the mayor, I believe he was the mayor of San Diego, actually was talking openly about jury nullification in the media. Sadly, there was a little, some sort of sexual harassment situation, and so he didn't make a very good poster boy after that, but I will mention it. I will mention that it was not only during this time those accused of cannabis-related offenses who benefited. There was also a man named Jeff Olson who was being prosecuted for vandalism. Oh my gosh, that's terrible, right? No one likes vandals. They are property criminals. They're damaging other people's property. Well, why would I be telling you about a story of jury nullification involving vandalism? Does FIJA like vandalism? No. However, I mentioned that in that way because when I got quoted by I'm going to use the scare quotes here, journalist in a newspaper about this trial, I feel like I got sucker punched because he basically made it sound like I was endorsing vandalism. The quote-unquote vandalism in this case was that Jeff Olson was outside a Bank of America branch, I believe it was Bank of America, sidewalk chalking messages that he felt Bank of America was behaving inappropriately and was spreading that message via chalk on the sidewalk. Now, I don't know about you, but as a kid, I did that plenty of times. The only difference was that I was drawing a hopscotch grid, or as we like to do at my house, I was drawing a street on our driveway so that we could play a game we called Driver's Ed, where you sat in a little red wagon and had one of your siblings push you around. It was your job to steer with the handle so that you could show that you passed your driver's test. Well, we never got arrested for that. We never got arrested for drawing on the sidewalk that wasn't on our property for our hopscotch grids. But I guess we aren't Bank of America either. So what I understand from the news reports is that apparently Bank of America didn't appreciate this and reportedly may have put in a complaint to the city, who then had this person arrested. He was charged with 13 counts of so-called vandalism, putting him at risk for a maximum penalty of $1,000 per charge and a year in jail per charge. 13 years in jail and $13,000 fine for chalk on the sidewalk. This isn't a town, by the way, that hosts at least one public sidewalk chalk art festival, possibly more. And also, let's think about what else is on the sidewalk if we want to do so for one distasteful moment. In a city, there is constantly litter. People are relieving themselves on the sidewalk. There are tire marks. There is, all sorts of filth and detritus, and bird droppings. I cannot even begin to name everything that you find on a sidewalk. But the chalk is the problem. It's vandalizing. That's certainly an interesting take. Now, I think most of us probably don't approve of vandalism. I certainly don't. I don't want my property damaged. But when you're talking about marking on a public sidewalk that is already, filthy with all sorts of other things, and this substance is going to wash off naturally the next time it rains, is that really what we're worried about with vandalism? Is that really something we want to throw someone in jail for 13 years for, have them become wards of the state, essentially, have to be housed and clothed at taxpayer expense, and then when they get out, how are they going to support themselves? What kind of trauma have they been through inside of prison? Prisons are not nice places. There are physical assaults. There are sexual assaults. There's all kinds of abuse, not only sometimes from prisoners, but also very alarmingly, from prison officials, and there's virtually no accountability for them.
All right, going to end it there. So just to know, jury notification is very important. Trial by jury is very important. Not jury trial. Trial by jury. Big difference, y'all. All right. This is Weezy People News. This was a learning video.